Justin, we've just heard that the film director Stanley Kubrick has died at the age of 70. Kubrick, who was an American, began his career in Hollywood, where he directed Spartacus, but he decided to move to Britain, where he directed Lolita, Clockwork Orange, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and The Shining.
Stanley Kubrick was widely regarded as one of the greatest and most controversial masters of cinema. He just finished what was to be his last film, Eyes Wide Shut, which took 5 years to make.
Stanley Kubrick has been called the Howard Hughes of cinema because he was such a recluse. I prefer to think of him as the Frank Sinatra of cinema because he always did everything his way. You can go back to any Kubrick film and feel rebirth.
Questo regista in 40 anni ha realizzato solamente 13 film, ma ogni film è stato un evento. Secondo alcuni, questo regista ha prodotto il miglior film mitologico, il miglior film di fantascienza, il miglior film di violenza metropolitana, il miglior film horror, il miglior film sulla guerra del Vietnam.
Kubrick is at the very least a genuine innovator who pushes out the boundaries of what is possible on film, and there have never been too many of those about. He's also an elusive man who rarely permits himself to be observed at work.
He was not any of the things that the newspapers wrote about him. And he himself said, it's very difficult. How do I defend myself? Do I write an article, you know, dear public, I'm charming?
Well, that's more difficult than it sounds, actually, because he never ever does a television or very rarely does any press interviews.
L'exploit, c'est bien sûr la série d'entretiens que Michel Simon a eu avec Stanley Kubrick au fil du temps, sur une période de 10 ans, et qui nous est restituée dans cet ouvrage. J'imagine que ça n'a pas été une mince affaire de se faire adopter par Kubrick et d'approcher un monstre sacré comme Kubrick.
Je ne me suis pas fait adopter, je crois que Kubrick n'adopte personne.
Oui.
Je me suis fait, disons, tolérer ou accepter provisoirement le temps d'un entretien. Il ne faut pas croire qu'on est l'intime de Kubrick, je crois que personne ne l'est.
Comment Michel Simon est né cette passion pour Stanley Kubrick?
Et comment, surtout, vous êtes l'un des rares journalistes au monde à pouvoir l'approcher? Comment avez-vous fait?
Il avait lu un article que j'avais écrit en 1968 sur son œuvre, qui était la première étude générale en France, et ensuite, à l'époque d'Orange Mécanique, il a accepté que mon nom lui soit soumis, puisqu'il fallait choisir un critique pour écrire pour l'Express un grand entretien, et donc je suis allé à Londres le rencontrer.
Mais alors il relit ce que vous écrivez, vous lui envoyez les épreuves?
Oui, non, il ne relit pas ce que j'écris sur lui, mais il relit ce que lui m'a dit.
Well, perhaps the first question will be about this problem of interview, because is it that more and more you feel reluctant to speak about your films?
Well, I've never found it meaningful or even possible to talk about film aesthetics in terms of my own films. I also don't particularly enjoy the interviews because one always feels under the obligation to say some witty, brilliant summary of the intentions of the film. And with Dr. Strangelove, you could talk about the problems of nuclear war. 2001, you could talk about extraterrestrial intelligence, but I've never been
Clockwork
able...
Orange about violence.
Yeah, or future social structures. I mean, I don't know what led me to make any of the films, really, that I've made. And I realize that my own thought processes are very hard to define in terms of, you know, what story do you want to make into a film? In the end, you know, it does become this very indefinable thing like, why do you find one particular girl attractive, or why did you marry your wife?
Yes, and also I suppose it's more difficult for you to analyze yourself because the material comes from somebody else, so it's more difficult to see the personal reasons that were behind it since you didn't write it yourself. But obviously, the choice of a subject is a very personal thing because you can choose between thousands of books and you choose one. So it's you become the author of the book in a way by choosing it.
Well, if somebody else has written a story, you have the one great first reading. You never again, once you read something for the first time, can ever have that experience. And the judgment of the narrative and the sense of excitement of what parts of the story reach you emotionally is something which doesn't exist if you write a story.
We know, I mean, everybody knows that it's notorious that you love to accumulate information and do research. I mean, is it a thrill for you? I mean, like being a reporter or a detective?
It is a little bit like a detective looking for clues. On Barry Lyndon, I created a picture file of thousands of drawings and paintings. I think I destroyed every art book that you can buy in a bookshop by tearing the pages out and sorting them out. But the costumes were all copied from paintings. I mean, none of the costumes were, quote, designed. It's stupid to have a quote, a designer interpret the 18th century as they may remember it from art school or from a few pictures they get together.
Would you agree that the more illusion works, the more realistic it is? I mean, the cinema has to be extremely realistic in order to create illusion? Or?
Well, I would always be attracted to something which offered interesting visual possibilities, but that certainly wouldn't be the only reason. And since part of the problem of any story is to make you believe what you're seeing, certainly getting a realistic atmosphere, especially if it's not a contemporary period, is just necessary as a starting point.
That's why you came to this idea of shooting with the light, natural light.
Well, that's something that I've always been very bothered by in period films, is the light on interiors is so false.
It was very different to any kind of other movie as far as photography was concerned, because the lighting was so, you know, a lot of it was shot by candlelight, a lot of it was shot with sort of equipment that Stanley Kubrick had found that had never been used before really on film. So it was quite an experience working with that. It was also quite difficult because there were times when you just couldn't even move a fraction of an inch. And there were days where we would sit there and just be lit all day, you know, literally.
Samuel, I'm going outside for a breath of air.
Yes, lady, of course.
To know about lighting and lenses and composition has to be a help as a movie director. I remember when I was making Spartacus, the cameraman, Russ Meddy, used to think it was very funny that I used to pick setups with a viewfinder. And he said to me, you know, we're shooting in that direction and it's a knee figure shot, and then just, you know, you go and rehearse with the actors, and when you come back, we'll have the shot and the setup and everything. He couldn't understand why I wanted to waste time making a composition. Certainly photography gave me the first step where I could actually try to make a movie, because without that, how could you make a movie by yourself if you didn't know anything about photography?
What kind of photographs were you doing? I mean, there's a famous photography of the newspaper vendor and the...
Photojournalism with natural light.
Mostly things of the street, like Cartier-Bresson more. I mean,
well, unfortunately, because Look always did feature stories, the subject matter was always tended to be idiotic. They would do a story like, is an athlete stronger than a baby? You know, and then I would have to go and there'd be some guy that would have to try to get in the same positions as a baby and things like that. They were pretty stupid feature stories, but occasionally I could do a sort of personality story or
a story about something like a university or something like that, where you had a chance to take some reasonable photographs.
You were 4 years at Luke?
Yeah, about 4 years. I was about 20.
This forest then, and all that happens now, is outside history. Only the unchanging shapes of fear and doubt and death are from our world. These soldiers that you see keep our language and our time, but have no other country but the mind.
You started by making almost the whole movie when you were 23, Fear and Desire, about 4 men in a patrol. I mean, what was behind this project?
That was a very arrogant, flippant script put together by myself and a boy that I knew who was a poet, where we thought that we were geniuses. And it was so incompetently done and undramatic and so pompous that I learned a lesson from that. At least it had the ambition of having some ideas in it, and I suppose you could say, in that sense, there's some continuity with with the rest of my films, which I've also tried to make sure that, you know, they weren't just hollow entertainments.
You get the feeling from your films that really the world is not only a stage, but it's a war, because man is fighting all the time.
Well, in a work of fiction, you have to have conflict. If there isn't a problem in a story, it can almost by definition not be a story. You know, how many happy marriages are there, and how many stepfathers love their stepsons, and how many stepsons love their stepfather? And how often do people who have ambitions which only involve money, do they find it a satisfying accomplishment?
Corporal Barry. You're a gallant soldier and have evidently come of good stock. But the idle, dissolute, and unprincipled. You've done a great deal of harm to the men. And for all your talents and bravery, I'm sure you will come to no good.
Barry Lyndon tells of the rise and fall of an Irish adventurer and, let's face it, cad, who becomes a soldier, a deserter, a gambler, a duelist, and eventually the husband of a very rich widow. There is, I think, deliberately a distance between the audience and the characters. You're asked to watch the story of their adventures and misadventures, but not necessarily to identify with them. Well, that's a dangerous approach, but it works. And what also works is the leisurely pace of the film, a pace that matches the pace of the novel and, I dare say, of 18th century life itself. So if you're expecting an all-action swashbuckler, forget it. What Kubrick presents instead is a hard, unromantic and unsentimental look at the life and times of a good-looking but ill-fated opportunist.
Some people came out of the movie and said, you know, in this character, we have absolutely no sympathy for him.
Well, I don't see how you can have no sympathy for him. On the other hand, we're well aware of the weakness of his character and the trap that he places himself in as a result of his ambitions, and the limitation of his personality that arises from the cynicism which develops from his early relationships with people. He then becomes a very limited person. He's completely unsuited for the life, not only socially, but temperamentally. And so he puts himself into a gilded cage. And from then on, everything goes sour.
But how did you decide on Ryan O'Neal for the main role?
Well, I couldn't think of anybody else, to say the truth. I mean, obviously Barry Lyndon has to be physically attractive. He couldn't be played by Al Pacino or Jack Nicholson. He had to also be able to, in the beginning, appear to be young, and yet not look too young at the end.
And the actors, how do you direct actors? I mean, do you speak with them a lot, or do you let them more feel the text, or do you have explanation?
Well, first of all, you discuss the character in general, and then you discuss the scene, what the character's real attitude is in the scene. Then comes this terrible moment of the first time that you actually rehearse a scene in the place you're going to shoot it. It's always a surprise. It's never what you thought it would be. The text usually has to be changed in some way or another. Then they have to get it to a level where it's realistic and interesting. And at that point, it then becomes relatively easy.
It was an extraordinary experience doing Clockwork Orange. A very long and arduous film to shoot. I think it was 7 months shooting. And I was injured a couple of times on the film. I had my ribs dented. I was off for 2 weeks with that. I think I had tonsillitis or something. One disaster after another as far as my health was concerned. I got a couple of scratched corneas, you know, my eyes. But having said all that, of course, I suppose one can say it was worth it. And if Stanley trusts you, if he trusts you, you're all right. If he doesn't, beware.
Very well, now listen to me carefully. The base is being put on condition red. I want this flashed to all sections immediately.
I had the worst time I've ever had on a picture. And nothing to do with Stanley, and everything to do, I guess, with my own hang-ups. I worked the first day at Shepperton, and I had a great deal of technical jargon, you know. And so I started to work, and I began to blow.
You know, those clowns outside are going to give me a pretty good going over in a few minutes.
Okay, so he went something like 38 takes.
I don't know how well I could stand up under torture.
And I was getting worse and worse. So finally he began to do pickups. A sentence at a time. And I mean, this is painful. This is embarrassing. Shit, you know, I'm here and I want to do well.
I know I'll have to answer what I've done.
Now finally I walked up to him and I said, Stanley, I'm sorry. I said, but there's nothing I can do. He said, I know that. He said, you know there's nothing I can do. I said, I know that. He said, but I'll tell you one thing. He said, the terror, the terror that's in your eyes may just give us the quality that we want.
He's perfectionist, but I mean on a more provable level. I mean, you know, it's different in a movie situation if you say, how was it to the operator? Stanley has the teleprompter now, so he knows. And the amount of reasons that he has why a take is not acceptable. Quintessentially perfectionist.
We had discussions about the elusive quality of perfection because down by take 75, a host of other things start going wrong. The tape finally gives out that held something onto the wall, and entropy takes over. We're all growing older, you know, so this search is extraordinary. He never gives up.
It was during a scene of a great many army people, Irish Army, whatever it was. But we utilized a lot of material that was absolutely authentic. Authentic flutes from museums, authentic drums, and so on and so forth. And it was very easy. I've, after all, recorded some very avant-garde music that's very difficult, and this was a cinch. We did 105 takes on this thing, and take 2 was perfect. And the orchestra looked at me, and I looked at them as though we're dealing with an insane person. And 105 takes, and finally, I threw down the baton, ran into the thing, and grabbed him by the neck and wanted to throw him through the window, and everyone started laughing there kind of nervously, and he said, "You're crazy." And I said, "Well, you've driven everybody crazy. That's the problem."
Directing a movie, if you try to do it properly,
is not always fun because you are in conflict with people. If you try to get it right and you care about it, it isn't something which is the greatest fun in the world. It's immensely satisfying sometimes, but it is a lot of hard work, and there is a lot of personal tension that occurs with everybody. The analogy would be better in a sort of military sense in that Napoleon, if he didn't pay as much attention to the precise details of his marching, you know, how he brought his troops to the right town on the right day, and he worked out all the calculations where they would come from different places and did all the mathematics himself and got them there at the right time. He would never have had an opportunity to be a genius on the battlefield. Battles were like the equivalent of making a film.
The key to his success as a filmmaker is that he was the ruthless general everyone wanted to march with. He got everyone on his side, and no matter what happened, he expected his cast and crew to keep up with his standard.
In a way, he kind of represented something to all of us because he was over there on his estate in England. He was far from Hollywood. He owned his own cameras, his own editing equipment, his own sound, and he worked entirely according to his own schedule. It's kind of inspiring at a time when everybody else seems to be marching to the drums of commerce and promotion.
Do you know what kind of a camera that is? What it's called?
It's a home movie.
Araflex, it's called. Napoleon is still in his grave, waiting to be brought back to life. I wonder what Napoleon would think of Lou Wasserman and David Picker.
Same.
Whether he would like to have them passing judgment on his life.
C'est vrai, la légende, les murs de 2 mètres qui bordent sa propriété.
Non, faut pas exagérer. Non,
c'est comment ça?
Non, c'est une propriété. C'est un homme qui vit à la campagne, qui vit avec sa femme, qui vit avec ses chiens, avec ses chats, qui a 3 filles, qui passe sa vie à travailler et à jouer aux échecs ou à lire des livres. Le prodige, évidemment, c'est que il a réussi d'abord à tourner ses films à 15 km de chez lui, pratiquement tous ses films. Il a fait reconstituer l'hôtel de Shining dans Londres, dans la banlieue de Londres. Il n'a pas allé dans le Colorado. Bon, tout est fait en studio. Le prodige, c'est qu'évidemment, tout le montage se fait dans sa propre maison. C'est-à-dire qu'il ne va même pas au studio pour monter. Il monte chez lui. Alors, il traverse le couloir, il va se coucher. C'est que les acteurs, il les sélectionne sur cassette. C'est-à-dire qu'il fait... Tout le monde vient... Il contrôle le monde à partir de sa maison.
Dans Full Metal Jacket, toutes les séquences du Vietnam ont été tournées dans une usine désaffectée près de Londres, c'est vrai.
Absolument. Mais Kubrick a une réponse à ça, je lui ai posé la question.
You worked in a disaffected plant?
Well, first thing I noticed was that the architecture in the peripheral areas where the fighting seemed to be was this sort of 1930s industrial functionalism. And by the sheerest accident, we found this area that is about a square mile, and it was designed by a German architect in the 30s, and it looked exactly like photographs we'd seen in Hue and Saigon, border, the outskirts of the city. And it just seemed like a miracle, because I don't know where, looking back, I don't know how we would have done those scenes with a tiny fraction of the reality and interest that we got from this location. In Hue, we could never have achieved this vision of hell that actually Hue looked like. And I had done tremendous research. I had thousands of stills and as much documentary footage as we could get from archives.
There was so much wonderful documentary material in Vietnam, you know, that had not been shot in any other war, including scenes of men dying. So, looking at 100 hours of documentary film actually probably tells you more than if you were there and didn't actually have combat.
The title, Full Metal Jacket, how did it come?
Full Metal Jacket is a type of bullet design, which, where the lead of the bullet is encased in copper. It's done to increase the reliability of the bullet feeding up the ramp into the chamber from the magazine because it's smoother. And also, I think the Geneva Convention has laid down that it's a more humane type of bullet because lead expands a little bit, and this one just makes a nice clean hole.
Do you think that the problem of war film is whatever you do to not to involve the audience into the battles, not to give them a vicarious experience? But isn't it an ethical problem for a filmmaker?
When you read the memoirs of people that have survived the war, many of them look back on it as being the greatest moments of their lives. So obviously there must be an aspect to it that is genuinely inspiring and spectacular in the real sense of the word. And the elements of comradeship, loyalty, courage, those things, in retrospect, people who take part in it are moved.
It is then with great pride that I note the fine work done by the soldiers of this command during the recent operation. It is with pleasure that I say, a job well done.
If you're interested by war in itself and the ambiguity of war, there is no ambiguity in the way you look at the hierarchy. I mean, whether in Dr. Strangelove or even in Path of Glory or in this film, The Drill Instructor.
Well, the drill instructor in this film, I think, is as naive as the boys are. I mean, he's just programmed to do that.
Did your parents have any children that lived?
Sir, yes, sir.
I bet they regret that. You're so ugly you could be a modern art masterpiece.
Lee Ermey was a Paris Island drill instructor. He actually was what he played. He was hired as a technical advisor, and I was looking for an actor for the part. But when we started interviewing boys for the recruits at Paris Island, we had the idea that Lee would do an improvisation with them. Originally, this was just to see how they would react, and he did what he did in the scene. The most bizarre, off-the-wall dialogue you could ever imagine. He asked one guy what his name was, and he said Lawrence. And he actually said to him,
Lawrence what, of Arabia?
Sir, no, sir.
That name sounds like royalty. Are you royalty?
Sir, no, sir.
Do you suck dicks?
Sir, no, sir.
Bullshit, I'll bet you could suck a golf ball through a garden hose.
So I suppose drill instructors, are in some way or another actors, but Lee, of course, I think is special.
I don't like the name Lawrence. Only faggots and sailors are called Lawrence. From now on, you're Gomer Pyle.
Sir, yes, sir.
Tell me, you were in Vietnam. Is this realistic? I mean, when you look at the movie, is that...
It's very realistic. I have a cross-section. When somebody hires me to do technical advice, I like technical advice because I like putting the realism in there. It's good for me.
Why?
Good therapy, I think, maybe.
But when you look at it, I mean, does it ring true with you? Is it hard for you to watch? Because you don't even like talking about your experiences in Vietnam.
It's really not that difficult for me to watch because I know it's not something that directly that I was involved with. Okay, I don't see the face of my friend, or I don't have any problem with this. But realism is there, and you can take a circle of 10 Vietnam vets and give them a situation, and they'll have 10 different ways to solve the problem. So what's real,
One of the other central features of the war was the manipulation of
the reality of the war by technocrats and hawk intellectuals in Washington who were always finding light at the end of the tunnel and encouraging the men there to lie and to exaggerate, kill ratios. There was an arrogance back in Washington by these, quote, intellectuals who ran the war like an advertising campaign. And they suffered terrific casualties, and they accomplished nothing that they thought they would. They thought people would actually rise up and join them. But because of the lying, the press and the public were so shocked. Well, it's a bit like the generals and the men in Paths of Glory. But in this case, it was more than just the ambition of the generals versus the men's lives.
I ordered an attack. Your troops refused to attack.
Our troops did attack, sir, but they could make no headway.
Because they didn't try, Colonel. I saw it myself. Half of your men never left the trenches.
A third of my men were pinned down because the fire was so intense.
Don't quibble over fractions, Colonel. The fact remains that a good part of your men never left their own trenches. Colonel Dax, I'm going to have 10 men from each company in your regiment tried under penalty of death for cowardice.
Penalty of death?
For cowardice! Aim!
The Path of Glory was not fundamentally different in philosophy from this film. World War I was really a fight for nothing. Certainly World War I marks a big turning point. Certainly the Vietnam War for America, because it was the first time that America really lost a war. So it's a big trauma.
Well, I think it taught America that you don't fight a war because some intellectuals decide that it might be a good thing, I don't think you're going to get Americans to fight a war again unless they think it really means something to them. Now, how far that kind of isolationism will go, I don't know.
Colonel? Marine, what is that button on your body armor?
A peace symbol, sir.
Where'd you get it?
I don't remember, sir.
What is that you've got written on your helmet?
Born to kill, sir.
You write born to kill on your helmet and you wear a peace button. What's that supposed to be, some kind of sick joke?
No, sir.
What is it supposed to mean?
And that, of course, is playing off on the Jungian, ideas of the duality of man, altruism and cooperation versus xenophobia and aggression. Now, the fact that people do not see the dark side of themselves and tend to externalize evil, people do only see themselves as good and everybody else as either weak or evil. I mean, there is always a problem when people are confronted with the shadow side.
Certainly in the case of Alex, he must be aware of his duality, and he must be aware of his own weakness in order to be good, or to prevent the worst kinds of personal and social evil.
What crime did you commit?
The accidental killing of a person, sir.
He brutally murdered a woman, sir, in furtherance of theft. 14 years, sir!
Excellent. He's enterprising, aggressive, outgoing, young, bold, vicious. He'll do.
In Clockwork Orange, he was in conflict with people who in a way were just as bad as he was in a different sense, and I suppose in an emotional way seemed less sympathetic.
Sin? What's all this about sin?
One of the really most puzzling social problems today is how can authority maintain itself without becoming repressive? You have an ever-increasing feeling among young people that politics and legal means of social change are too slow and maybe useless. On the other hand, you have authority that feels threatened by terrorism and this growing sense of anarchy that they can feel. And the question is, how do you achieve, if it's possible anymore, some kind of balance? It certainly doesn't lie in this very utopian sort of optimistic view that if you destroy authority, then something good will come of it. And equally, it doesn't lie by saying, you know, authority must impose its will with greater and greater force. It's a dilemma.
The Scala Cinema in London is in court today, accused of breach of copyright after allegedly showing the controversial film Clockwork Orange. The film has been banned in Britain for 20 years at the request of its director, after critics claimed it glamorized violence.
You see more violence on a news program. You know, you see more violence in a John Wayne film, because John Wayne always shoots and you always feel, oh, good old John Wayne, you know, he's the goodie and he shot the baddie. And it's an emotional response, you know. I personally feel that it's more violence of the imagination, of the mind. I think the film is very important because the statement it makes is about the freedom of human beings to choose. And that's more important than any of these sensational elements that the press and people have been talking about.
Nobody except people who were trying to prove that Clockwork Orange was an evil film. I mean, nobody could believe that one was in favor of Alex. It's only that in telling a story like that, you want to present Alex as he feels and as he is to himself. In analyzing the film, you could think that there was more sympathy with Alex, but since it's a satirical story, I mean, and since the nature of satire is that you state the opposite of the truth as if it is the truth, I don't see how anybody of any intelligence or even any ordinary person could think that you really thought Alex was the hero. It's probably what attracted me to the book, is this strange duality of a character who is plainly evil, and yet, because of him operating on this unconscious level, makes you aware of things in your own personality which you then identify with him.
You are more attracted by evil characters, finally, than by good ones. I was thinking of Milton, you know, making Paradise Lost much more interesting.
Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven.
How do you see your character in this film? How do you see the reason of his behavior? It's very ironical because he wants to write, to be creative, and he wants to be free, and he's a slave, in fact, of his own neurosis.
Well, you can only fill in the details of Jack's personality. He is bitterly disappointed with himself. He's a person who obviously has immense rage. He is married to a woman who he obviously has nothing but contempt for, and doesn't like his son. You then put him in a situation, you know, where he then is exposed to evil forces in the hotel. I mean, now you're getting into the supernatural side of the story, and All those other factors simply serve to prepare him, to make him a suitable servant of their wishes.
In this story, I mean, at least the way you have shot it, there is always the possibility that everything is in the mind.
Well, this is what I found so ingenious about the way the novel was written. And you assume, as you read it, that the things that are happening are probably going to be a product of his imagination. And I think this allows you to start accepting them.
Do you think there is an interaction between the souls in the hotel, and it's not purely a projection of his mental thing? Well, you can interpret that.
Well, I mean, I interpret the story as being real. I mean, I just accept for the story purposes that everything is true.
There are three mazes, if I remember well. There is the real maze, there is a kind of map or plan of the maze, and it's also the maze is in a way is the hotel in reduction, because hotels are full of corridors and things like that. So I think this idea is extremely powerful, and it goes with the imaginary dimension of the film.
I remember once reading something about where maze seemed a perfect kind of metaphor for many things about life, and that somebody was describing how in a maze everybody is giving advice to each other and misleading each other completely by their advice, that nobody knows quite what to do. They're all giving each other ideas which are all wrong.
Je crois qu'il y a une chose qu'on remarque, Kubrick, c'est quelqu'un qui aime beaucoup les travelling, qui aime beaucoup les grands mouvements d'appareil. Les mouvements d'appareil, c'est la destinée. C'est-à-dire, c'est la destinée, c'est aussi le labyrinthe. C'est à la fois une sorte de vide, on tourne en rond, et en même temps, on est pris dans un engrenage et dans une sorte de fatalité.
Many types of genre material are really ways of thinking about death. That in a way, it is, on a psychological level, possibly a way of exploring attitudes towards death.
Your films give a feeling of great despair.
If you make certain assumptions about the nature of man, and you build a social situation on false assumptions, if you assume that man is fundamentally good, it will disappoint you.
What we're doing in the movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, is showing some of the things that will develop in the world of the future as a result of our present first steps into space. The next generation will explore the planets, bring back new knowledge, answering old questions, and of course, asking fresh ones. It's really the next stage in the evolution of mankind. About half a century ago, the great Russian space pioneer Tsiolkovsky said, "Earth is the cradle of mankind, but you cannot live in the cradle forever." And that is very true, and out here among the stars lies the destiny of mankind.
2001, c'est dans une génération, c'est donc demain. Mais est-ce qu'à ce moment-là, un voyage pour Jupiter pourra se faire comme maintenant on fait un voyage pour aller fouiller l'Amazonie? Monsieur Biguet.
Si l'on considère qu'il y a seulement 11 ans qu'a été lancé le premier Sputnik et que sans doute l'an prochain les premiers hommes auront débarqué sur la Lune, on serait tenté d'être très optimiste et de répondre oui.
The human species hasn't changed since Cro-Magnon man, and in terms of evolutionary time, we're not going to change much in the next 100, 200 years. The critical problem of our survival is going to have to be settled long before 100 or 200 years. Now, where's the source of intelligence going to come from?
Good evening, Dave.
How you doing, Hal?
Everything's running smoothly, and you?
Oh, not too bad.
Have you been doing some more work?
A few sketches.
May I see them?
Sure.
That's a very nice rendering, Dave. I think you've improved a great deal.
There's something that's happening already today. You might say a mechaniarchy, or whatever the word would be. The love that we have now for machines, the smell and the feel of a beautiful camera or a tape recorder. There's an aesthetic, an almost sensuous aesthetic about machines. I'm sure it'd be useful to them to know what human feelings are, because it'll help them understand us.
The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.
Hal, despite your enormous intellect, are you ever frustrated by your dependence on people to carry out actions?
Not in the slightest bit. I enjoy working with people.
J'ai l'impression que ce robot est extrêmement humain. Il est presque plus humain que les hommes qui sont là-dedans, me semble-t-il. Ou en tout cas, il est pas du tout le robot tel qu'on le voit dans les films classiques de science-fiction, n'est-ce pas, qui est l'opposé de l'homme.
We do obviously need some source of intelligence of a magnitude considerably greater than seems to exist at the moment. And you could say that man's survival depends on the ultra-intelligent machine. I can't think of any reason why it's a frightening prospect, because intelligence seems to me to be something which is good. And so I can't see how your ultra-intelligent machine is going to be any worse than a man.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
Il me paraît important de dire que Karl n'est à aucun moment une machine, qu'il reste toujours et qu'il est essentiellement une présence humaine qui est d'abord protectrice, qui devient ensuite menaçante, et il est capable d'erreur aussi, comme l'homme, bien qu'il domine l'homme.
La machine essayait de se révolter
Et là, il y a évidemment une erreur scientifique, peut-être parce que la machine ne pourrait pas dépasser les limites des mémoires qu'on lui introduit. D'ailleurs, on voit très bien que là, le cosmonaute est en train de démonter les mémoires pour le paralyser.
I'm afraid. I'm afraid, Dave.
At the moment, the problems of the world appear to be problems only because man seems to lack the intelligence to think his way out of the present trap that we seem to be in.
Dave, my mind is going. I can feel it. I can feel it. I can feel it. I can feel it.
Tous les films de Kubrick, au fond, traitent du même sujet, et en même temps, ils sont tous très très différents les uns des autres. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a toujours une surface de civilisation, tout a l'air calme.
Oui.
Barry Lyndon, c'est le XVIIIe siècle.
Oui.
2001, c'est des machines parfaites. N'est-ce pas? L'armée de 14-18, une armée très disciplinée.
Tout doit fonctionner.
Tout fonctionne. Et c'est pour ça que le XVIIIe siècle, c'est son époque. C'est une époque de très grande civilisation, de très grande harmonie, de très grande culture, de très grande rationalité. Et en dessous, il y a l'irrationnel, il y a les pulsions, il y a la violence, il y a le côté animal de l'homme. C'est le rapport vraiment entre la vie consciente et la vie inconsciente. Et dans tous ces films, il y a cela, et à la fin, ça explose, et ça fait irruption, que ce soit dans l'histoire ou dans la vie privée.
You have no other project now, as usual.
No, I wish I did.
But Schnitzler, you still don't want to do that. Traumnovelle.
I'm not sure. I might. It is interesting. You've read it.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's not about sex. Stanley never said it was about sex. It's about sexual obsession, and it's a thriller about sexual obsession and jealousy. And, you know, I mean, all the rumors that surfaced about, you know, I mean, just the wildest stories you could ever imagine that were, it's not pornography. If he wanted to do that, he would have done that.
If you men only knew.
I'll tell you what I do know is you got a little stoned tonight, you've been trying to pick a fight with me, and now you're trying to make me jealous.
But you're not the jealous type, are you?
No, I'm not.
You've never been jealous about me, have you?
No, I haven't.
And why haven't you ever been jealous about me?
Well, I don't know, Alice. Maybe because you're my wife.
Do you think monogamy is a natural state?
I think it's a choice. I mean, if it was just a natural state, why would people desire other people?
Do you think that there is in everybody a thin edge, depravity, or extreme danger of desire, I suppose? Is it in everyone?
Sure. Yeah. How honest people are about it is a different thing, but I think we all have it.
Most situations where somebody is hopelessly in love with someone who
who they shouldn't be, it always is really. It tends to be physical. And most tragic, masochistic relationships that I am aware of are essentially physical attraction, and this seemed to say it. This sort of primitive part of your mind that just is fascinated by the mystery of what's going on. It's all part of this sort of gigantic fantasy that the male sex fantasy. I think that the story would become impossible if you tried to give reasons for it.
I think that you're an innovator. I mean, you like very much to break new things, but at the same time, you're very conscious of tradition.
Well, I think that one of the things that characterizes some of the failures of 20th century art, and in all art forms, is a obsession with total originality. Innovation means, moving it forward, but not abandoning the classical form, the art form that you're working on. But I do think the real explosion will come when someone finally liberates the narrative structure.
What surprises me is that you have absolutely no prejudice towards choice of a subject. I mean, anything can happen.
I might, but I'm not aware of it. I mean, a good story that you can make in a film is a miracle. And, it's very hard to work miracles. Someone sent me an article about Schnitzler, and he died in the most wonderful way. He was sitting writing at the typewriter, and somebody was in the next room, and he got up to give him a page and just fell over, and that was it. He hadn't been ill or anything. He was just working and dying.
I was supposed to talk to him on Sunday, and sometimes Stanley would call, in the middle of the night. Or I remember thinking the phone rang, and I thought it was either Nick or Stanley. It's the only people who usually call in the middle of the night. And it was Leon, and he said, Tom, Stanley Kubrick died in his sleep. And I remember just thinking, this just isn't happening.
How disappointing you make the end of a film is a matter of, I suppose, taste or artistic balance, whatever it is, but you always are faced with the problem of, are you going to try to reinforce this illusion which melodrama fosters, or are you going to try to reflect what one sees about life? Melodrama uses all the problems of the world and all the disasters which befall the main characters to finally show you that the world is a benevolent and fair place, and all the tests and trials and seeming misfortunes which occur in the end just reinforce this belief. But tragedy or honesty, or an attempt at presenting life in a way that seems closer to reality than melodrama, can leave you with a feeling of desolation. But certainly the formula approach, which presents the world in a way other than it is, doesn't seem to have a great deal of merit unless you're just making entertainment. Fini?
Thank you very much.